Everyone in Queensland will be choosing who they want to represent them in local council on March 16th. Along with councillors in their local electorate, all Brisbane residents will vote directly for who the next Lord Mayor of Brisbane will be. But do you really know who to choose and what each of the three candidates really stand for? To help you out, I arranged to interview all three candidates and ask them the exact same questions so that you can compare their answers and decide for yourself. The questions are not my own, but the questions on key issues subscribers of the Brisbane Channel, along with other Brisbane community members, said were important to them. The three candidates each represent one of the major parties: Labor, the Liberal National Coalition, and the Greens. For the Greens, Jonathan Sriranganathan will be running. For Labor, Tracey Price, and the current Lord Mayor Adrian Schrinner will be running for the LNP. For these interviews, I did not share the questions with the candidates before I asked them, and I've included the answers given in full. As some may be quite long, I've divided the interviews into each question, so you can just skip to the issues you care most about. So here we go. Thanks for coming down and giving a bit of time to answer a few questions.
Yeah, a pleasure. You actually remind me of someone I grew up with.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you'd be his brother or something.
Probably not that. All right, so obviously we've already conducted interviews with the other two candidates for Lord Mayor. And so you're coming from a different angle, I guess, in that you've sort of already had the job. So probably ask you a couple of questions, just touching on that first, just
Sure.
so that we know where we're coming from before we look to where we're going to. So I guess first up, what would you say is the thing you're most proud of in the time that you've had up till now as Lord Mayor?
Well, there's been a few things. Obviously, we've come through quite a bit of adversity. There's been the pandemic, which started shortly after I became Lord Mayor. Then we've had the flood in 2022 and now a sort of global inflation and cost of living crisis. So there's been a lot of challenges thrown our way, but we've come through all of that in good shape and being the most attractive place in Australia to live. And so coming out of those challenges, being the place that people want to come to, I think the thing I'm most proud of is that people want to come and live in Brisbane. And I think people do vote with their feet. They know that it's a happening place. They know it's an exciting place. They know it's got a bright future and they want to live here. So that's probably the thing I'm most proud of. The fact that it's been so attractive for people from all around Australia and all around the world to come and live here. And they love it. That's, who can not be proud of Brisbane? So.
All right, so let's go for the slightly harder one. And that is, in the time that you've been Lord Mayor, is there anything that you either maybe, if you could go back, you might do differently? Is there something that maybe you would change if you had the chance over again?
Yeah, there's always learnings. Like when you look back with the benefit of hindsight, you would absolutely do various things differently. Like we're human creatures that learn things as we go, and that's important. I think the critical thing is, the way that the Olympics, we got the Olympics early. We got a long time frame to plan and deliver outcomes. And looking back, the thing I'm most upset about and most disappointed about is I feel that a lot of that time, that head start we got, has been wasted to this point. And so my biggest regret is that more hasn't happened with the Olympics and gearing up for that opportunity. I think there's a process underway to change that now, but that's the thing I look back and think we saw our city, our state, our federal government waste time for the Olympics that could have been used with delivery.
Okay. All right, well, let's jump into the questions that everybody's been asked so that people can compare like for like. So I'll let everybody know that these are not my questions. These are questions that subscribers to the Brisbane Channel, as well as other members of the community, have said that they would like to ask. So it's really the people of Brisbane asking the questions. Okay. And I also do need to point out that this interview is being conducted after the other two have already been become public. So there is a little bit of an advantage in sort of knowing what the questions might be. So I just sort of do need to point that out so people can take that into account when they're comparing. But let's jump into them. So first up, what motivated you to run, to continue as Lord Mayor of Brisbane?
Well, I guess the seed was planted when I was young, so I was born in Brisbane, and in my perspective, a lot of the exciting things about Brisbane's progress were being driven at the council level, and so I got that sense as a kid. And so whether it's running around on the council buses, whether it's when the city cats were introduced, the push for Expo 88 and the great outcomes after Expo 88 with South Bank, council's always had a critical role in the progress of the city, and it's really been the only level of government I've ever been interested in. I've only ever been interested in council. I see that as the most critical thing that can influence the city and create better outcomes for Brisbane residents. They all start at the council level. So it's that fundamental. What influences people's day-to-day life? It's the roads they drive on, the parks that they use, the libraries, the buses, the city cats, all of those things, and even the rubbish collection. They influence people's daily life, and we can make people's lives better through the local government level. So, that's why I've always been interested in council and not the other levels of government.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, before I became the Lord Mayor, I was the Deputy Mayor for 8 years, so I got a good sense of what's involved, and also a good apprenticeship as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What do you see as the most important aspects of the role of Lord Mayor?
Well, it's a really broad role. It's got a broad description of what you need to be across, anything from basic local councillor issues in a local community, all the way up to managing a $4.3 billion budget. So there's a big spectrum of different things you need to be across. Now at the state government level, it's expected that ministers will be responsible for their portfolio, and the Premier is not necessarily across every portfolio. I think there's a greater expectation at the council level that the Lord Mayor has to be across most things that happen in council, if not everything. And so it is a really broad role, and that keeps the job interesting as well. You're always learning new things. You're always getting involved in different aspects of the job. No 2 days are the same. And that's, one of the great things about the role, I think.
Okay. So what's your broad vision for Brisbane going forward from here?
Well, it's really simple. We need a city that gets better each year. And my vision has always been that the Brisbane of tomorrow is better than the Brisbane of today. And you can see that's been happening. Brisbane is a city that keeps getting better each year, and the growth that we're seeing, indicates people are voting with their feet and coming here. They want to be part of it. And so it's that progress each year that has to be made, one step at a time, the city getting better each year. So that's the broad vision. How we achieve that vision, there's a lot that goes into it, but mainly it's about managing growth. So I see our role as managing growth and seeing growth not only as a challenge, but also an opportunity. And so how do we deal with population growth? It's about investing in better infrastructure, roads and public transport, growing our lifestyle opportunities with parks and green space and libraries and a whole range of other services. Dealing with growth is a big part of the vision, and it's a big part of our plan.
Okay. So is there anything more you'd like to talk about in terms of that dealing with the growth? Because that's a question that's later for the other ones, but instead of coming back to it, let's sort of expand on that a little bit now.
Well, obviously growth, it creates a more vibrant economy with a growing population, but there's challenges with congestion, there's challenges with housing, there's challenges in protecting the livability and green spaces of our city. And so we're focused on all of these things to make sure that Brisbane gets better rather than goes backwards each year. And I am laser-like focused on those things that we can do to make sure it gets better each year, whether it's investing in roads, better public transport, and I know we'll talk about, no doubt, some of those things later on.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously it's a challenging role, balancing the interests of so many diverse groups that live within the city and operate within the city. So how do you balance all of those different interests that may sometimes seem to actually be conflicting with each other?
Well, I think listening to people and being available is really important. And so I've made a habit for many years now of doing pop-up offices with local councillors at shopping centres. And so, people they might be there on a Saturday or Sunday doing their shopping. They'll see me or the councillor there, and they'll have a chat about whatever's on their mind. That's really important to gauge what people are interested in. But the team plays a critical role. So my team, we've got representatives from right across Brisbane, and every week, without fail, we have important meetings where we talk about the issues that are important across the city. And so councillors in their local communities are constantly feeding back issues from every corner of the city. And that is something that is absolutely critical when it comes to making sure we balance the needs of what is a big city. There's almost 1.3 million people living in Brisbane now. And so the scale of that is bigger than any other local government. And that means the team is critical in making sure that the community needs are met. And we've got a great team, and I'm proud of my team, and I work closely with them, and they're critical in providing that feedback and that balanced approach.
What is your assessment of the current state of the public transport system? Because this was one of probably the largest concerns of people that let me know what they wanted asked. And what are your plans for the future in sort of improving on that?
Well, I think we need to move from public transport to mass transport. And that's essentially the transition that we're in at the moment, with a combination of Brisbane Metro and also at the state government level, Cross River Rail. We know we need to move large volumes of people quickly and efficiently. And the answer is not necessarily just putting more buses on congested roads. The answer is to make sure we can provide reliability and high frequency to move large numbers of people. And so rail does that. Rail is not something that we control, and that's obviously being built by the state government, and we support that. That's more of a regional solution, so moving people between the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast, and Brisbane and everywhere in between. So it's a regional solution, but for more of a Brisbane-based solution, Brisbane Metro I see as being absolutely critical. It is the quickest and most effective way that we can provide mass transit services to more parts of the city. And so with the Metro solution, it can be rolled out on different routes. The ideal situation would be it would run on busways or transitways separated from general traffic. There's no point in having a mass transit vehicle that gets stuck in the general traffic. And so separating out public transport from general traffic is critical, and the Metro solution does that. But like I said, it's essentially we need to move from public transport to mass transport as our city grows, and that's very much where I see Metro fitting in.
Yeah, so you did mention the roads, and sort of that if the public transport's getting caught up in the traffic congestion, then that's not really going to help anything. So what do you see as ways of actually tackling that traffic congestion? I mean, coming here this morning was a nightmare. I got stuck. I was probably static more than I was moving. So what are the plans that you have for improving that situation?
So there's no one silver bullet when it comes to traffic congestion. And if you look at the experiences of cities all around the world, some cities just give up and they accept it is a fact of life. We're not going to do that. We need to keep investing. So we've got a 4-point plan when it comes to traffic congestion. And so it's a combination of different strategies. It's investing in upgrading roads where they're needed, and particularly major arterial routes and trunk corridors, because the reality is we'll continue to have traffic coming from outside of Brisbane into Brisbane from all of the growing areas around us, and they'll be coming and using the roads here. And as the population grows, road investment is required. Second critical thing is moving from public transport to mass transit through projects like Brisbane Metro with more high frequency turn up and go services. So that's very much part of the plan. And later on this year, Brisbane Metro services will start operating. But when they start operating, there'll be a complete refresh of the bus network as well, because the Metro services will allow us to redirect standard bus services to more parts of the city and put on more frequency, better services in a lot of different parts of the city. So that's happening later on this year. The third part of the 4-point plan is to invest in active travel opportunities. And so that is whether it's bikeways, river walks, green bridges. These are things that we've continued to invest in, and they're really important to give people alternatives. And that's particularly relevant in some of the inner city areas where people can quite easily walk and cycle or scoot to where they need to go. That takes cars off the road, and that's a great thing, and that's part of reducing traffic congestion. And then the final part of the 4-point plan is getting better use out of our existing infrastructure. Now, you've battled through the midweek traffic, and it's been interesting since the pandemic. Traffic is generally lighter on Mondays and Fridays, with flexible work environments, people working from home on those days. But in the middle of the week, the traffic is diabolical, and so what that says is that there's also some management of the existing network and travel demand management that can help as well. And one of the things we announced was a brand new traffic management system to be introduced in Brisbane. There's some great systems coming into play around the world now. Our technology that we use to control traffic signals is 1980s, 1990s technology, and there's some great new technology and other examples in other cities around the world where they've started using this new technology. They can get something like 25% better efficiency and better traffic flow out of an existing network by improving the technology that manages the road network and the transport network. So we're looking across all of those 4 areas. As I said, there's no one silver bullet, but investing across all of those areas will help.
Okay, so can we focus in a little bit on the third point, and that's the active transport? Could you give a little more detail about the plans there in expanding that?
So our bikeways started off as sort of mainly recreational assets. So when they were first built, a number of decades ago, it was for recreation purposes, and we've added to them to create some commuter opportunities as well. So people getting to and from work or to and from the shops. And also e-scooters have also revolutionised the way people travel around, because there is a significant number of people that may not want to ride to work. We have a subtropical climate here, and they'd prefer to use something with a bit of assistance like an e-bike or an e-scooter. And so that's opened up the opportunity for a new group of people. And we're seeing millions of trips taken on e-bikes and e-scooters just in recent years. And that's technology that is relatively new in the scheme of things. So providing a network that caters for walking, cycling, scooting and e-bikes and everything in between is really important. But particularly where you have higher density populations as well. And that's why the Green Bridges program is important. We opened the first one just recently at Breakfast Creek, and that connects into the Riverwalk along Kingston Smith Drive and the growing Hamilton North Shore community. It provides opportunities for people through that Newstead and Tenerife area as well. And so that's an example of where a higher density community is provided with good walking and cycling and scooting opportunities, and they use it. The new bridge that we're building across the river at Kangaroo Point will do a similar thing, connecting high density communities so that, Kangaroo Point and the city is very close. But at the moment, to get between the two is, very circuitous. And so in 460 metres, you'll be able to get from Kangaroo Point to the city. You won't have to use your car. You can walk, cycle or scoot. And that will be a game changer for people moving through those inner city areas. We'd also like to deliver green bridges at Toowong, between Toowong and West End, and between West End and St Lucia as well, and that's in the future program, and we're working with the other 2 levels of government to help secure some funding to move those forward. And so there's a plan that involves building more bikeways, building more riverwalks, building new bridges, and that's going to be critical as our city grows.
What do you see Brisbane City Council can do in terms of the housing and rental crisis that we're facing at the moment?
Well, it's interesting because I mentioned there were no silver bullets or single ways to solve traffic congestion, and it's the same with housing. There's a range of things that have to be done at all 3 levels of government. We control some of the levers, the state government controls some of the levers, and the federal government controls some of the levers. Some of those levers are also controlled by just the market. Things like interest rates, they do have an impact on housing and on rents. They flow down, and it's not something that any government can control. So the things that we can control is we need to have a supply of all kinds of housing. So whether it's social and affordable housing, whether it's just standard private housing, whether it's retirement living, we need more of everything. And so any solution that just focuses on one of those things is not dealing with the full picture. There needs to be more homes because our population is growing. And so, the idea that we'll solve the housing crisis by making use of vacant properties, I mean, that's only a small percentage of the need there. And so that in itself won't solve the housing crisis, but a suite of initiatives will. So we've tried to open up supply, and we've done that in a couple of ways. First of all, by accommodating more home opportunity or home building opportunities in well-located areas like the Curlew precinct. It's just 1 kilometre from the city. There's great public transport and active transport infrastructure, and there's an opportunity to provide 10,000 more homes in that location. Transforming areas that are currently factories, a milk factory, a recycling plant, a concrete factory, into vibrant residential communities. That's a great opportunity. We're looking at other industrial areas across the city that need a bit of revitalisation and can be transformed into mixed-use communities. So there's a number of locations where industry have progressively moved out or moved to other areas, and there's an opportunity to build mixed-use housing in that location. So we've got a number of locations there, but also reducing the cost of building is critical at the moment. We're hearing very much from the building industry that a lot of projects just aren't stacking up. And so they want to build new homes. There's demand for new homes, but they can't make it work financially. And this idea that you're going to tax your way out of a housing crisis is ludicrous. You need to bring down the costs of building. And so by reducing costs on home builders, you can ensure more homes are built. Because at the moment, people have approvals to build, but they can't make it work financially. And so it's just sitting there. And we need to free up those opportunities and bring down the cost of building homes to make it more affordable for people and bring on more supply.
The Olympics.
Yeah.
So what is your position on the Olympics and the preparations, from now until that point?
Well, I sort of touched on this before. I think the Olympics are a fantastic opportunity. And remember, it's the Olympics and the Paralympics. And so 2 major events, two of the world's biggest events here in Brisbane, and a great opportunity to showcase the city to the world, but also to grow our own infrastructure and facilities that will benefit the community. And so from my perspective, it's always been about getting a lasting legacy for the community. You don't want to invest if it's just for a few short weeks. You want to invest if it leaves a lasting legacy. And so the frustration I expressed before is that there's been about 2.5 years setting up committees and talking about legacy, but not actually building anything. And so I'm a bit impatient when it comes to the Olympics. We need to get it back on track. We need to start building legacy assets for the community. And in my mind, there's been a lot of talk about a stadium, but in my mind, the best kind of legacy assets will be things like better public transport and infrastructure upgrades, being able to move around the region more easily. And if it's a sporting facility, then it needs to be something that the community will use on an ongoing basis and get benefit from, not just for one big event and then sort of sits idle. And we've seen that happen in some other cities. So we need to get it right. There's a review being undertaken at the moment, and I'm confident that this review will help get the process back on track and we can move forward.
Do you have plans in terms of making Brisbane more flood resilient and resistant as well?
The decision to build Brisbane here on a floodplain is something that it can't be changed. That horse is bolted. Brisbane was established on a floodplain, and a significant part of the city has a risk of flooding either through the river flooding or creek flooding or overland flow. And that's just a function of where we are geographically. You can't move Brisbane. You can't stop Brisbane growing. And so it's about making sure that we manage the risk and we're more resilient. And managing the risk is through stricter development controls, and that means building in a way that's more resilient, building infrastructure that's more resilient, and it may occasionally get flooded, but you can also bounce back quicker and more affordably. And an example with our infrastructure, the ferry network, in 2011, in the big flood we had in 2011, it took almost 4 years for the ferry network to be fully rebuilt. Whereas after the 2022 flood, with the new resilient terminals and infrastructure, the network was fully up and running within 12 months. So that's an example of how you build things more resiliently. And a lot of people found that with homes and businesses as well. We have a resilient homes program that we've been supporting for a number of years, and the residents that were involved in that program were able to bounce back quicker, get their homes back up and running quicker, or their businesses up and running quicker. And that's about using different materials and the location of electrical services and various other things. And so being more resilient is a key part of it. We need to accept, though, that the 2022 floods, we received more rain in just a few days than London receives in an entire year. So this is an extraordinary event, and no amount of drainage will stop flooding in that circumstance. But we're also investing in drainage as well. That's part of the solution and part of making us more resilient. And so we've almost doubled the budget for drainage works, and that work continues on and will be ongoing.
How can Brisbane City Council, under your leadership, create more of a sense of community in the coming years?
Well, I think we do have a fantastic sense of community, and people that come from other places around the world and around Australia, they notice it immediately. And it's sometimes in the simple things. It's the fact that people say thank you to the bus driver when they get off the bus. That doesn't happen in all places. It's we talked about the flood. It's the way that people come together after a natural disaster and help each other. In a lot of places around the world, it's every person for themselves, and there's not that same community spirit. And so it's strong in Brisbane, and the key is to actually keep it strong as we grow. And so as new people come into the community, to sort of introduce them to that community spirit, and so that they know that part of being a Brisbane resident is having that community spirit and keeping it alive. And so one of the things that I always do is welcome new citizens as they're becoming citizens in City Hall. So there's a ceremony that happens every month, and usually about 500 or 600 new citizens at a time. And it's a great opportunity to connect with people as they're entering the community, and sharing that community spirit with them, making contact, and also letting them know to be involved in their community is a critical part of it. So it's really keeping that spirit alive and keeping those things that make Brisbane unique and Queensland unique alive. As we have a great community spirit, let's keep it alive.
And what kind of culture within Brisbane City Council do you think is conducive to getting things done and not getting caught up in things that might actually limit your effectiveness?
Yeah, I think there's two parts of that question, or two parts of the answer. First of all is remembering that in everything we do, Brisbane City Council is a service organisation that exists to service the residents of Brisbane. And so we exist to serve. That's the number one thing, and reminding everyone in the organisation that that's why we exist is really important. But the other thing that makes us different as well is the fact that even though there's many different departments and sections of council, that we always try and remind everyone in council that we are one council. And so in the state government, they have the Department of Health, the Department of Education, and a whole range of departments, and often those departments don't necessarily work well together. And we're constantly drumming into everyone in council that we're part of one organisation and we need to work together, because if we work together, we get a better outcome for the community. One of the great examples of the one council approach is our call centre. Before that call centre was set up, if you wanted to talk to the development section of council, you'd have to call one number. If you wanted to talk to the waste section of council, you'd call a different number, and it was all brought together as one central number, one call centre that's based in Brisbane, with Brisbane people manning the phones, and that's exemplifying the one council approach, because that provides a better outcome to people. People don't want to get the run around and be bounced from department to department, and so in everything we try and do, we remind people it's about serving the residents, we're here to serve, and it's about one council working together.
All right, so one thing that people asked me to ask each of the candidates was to share something that they respect about the other two candidates. So.
Well, that's a good one. I think this type of job that where all three of us are putting our hand up for, if you compare it to any other job, a job interview might involve a one-on-one meeting with your employer or potential employer, or it might involve a small panel. All three of us are having a job interview with 1.2 or 1.3 million people, and that is something quite unique. And so it takes courage to put your hand up for that kind of role or opportunity. And I actually think simply because they are putting their hand up and giving it a go, that takes courage and a certain amount of strength. And I respect that in anyone. Anyone who puts their hand up for a role like this is something I respect, and that is a good thing. So I think that says a lot.
Okay, rates was another thing people ask about. Do you see rates increasing in the coming years?
Well, the answer to that question rests fundamentally on what the three candidates promised at this election. Because in the end, whatever is promised has to be paid for somehow. And you can talk about offering free things here and there, but it all comes at a cost, and someone has to pay for it. And so at this point in time, I think, with the cost of living crisis, with people really focused on household budgets and keeping costs down, I think this is not the election for big spending commitments or for promising more than what can actually be delivered. And so we've been really conscious of that. We think the best way to keep rates down in the future is by not making grandiose promises in this election. There's a lot that's already happening. There's a lot on the go. And I mentioned Brisbane Metro, a range of road upgrades, bridges being built. So there's a lot happening. But what on top of that is being promised in this election will decide whether rates go up or how fast they go up. And so the contrast at the moment is that we have made $142 million worth of new commitments in this campaign so far. There will be some additional commitments, but not a great deal in terms of an extra cost. And my two, competitors, one of them has made $1.4 billion worth of commitments, and the other one has made $1.7 billion worth of commitments. So in the end, those things have to be paid for, and those things will drive up rates. They can't explain how they're going to pay for them. In the end, ratepayers will pay for them. So I guess that's a key point of difference here in this election.
Okay, so now the really divisive issues. I'm sure you've seen what they are. So what is your position on these things? You might be amazed at how passionate people are about these topics. So first one, pineapple on pizza.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I love pineapple on virtually everything. It's part of being a Queenslander.
Vegemite. Do you keep it in the fridge or in the pantry?
Usually both. There's sometimes when you need a cool version of Vegemite and some when you need a warm version. But yeah, we're a big Vegemite household. And in fact, you see here, I've got a Vegemite phone case. I'm mad about Vegemite. Some of my kids are as well, and so I'm passing that down, the generational thing. But yeah, both in the fridge and in the pantry.
Okay. How could I forget? Ibis or Curlew?
Ooh, that's easy. I love Ibis. It's it's obviously a bird that cops a bit of flack from people. A little bit controversial, but there's something very Brisbane about it. The other thing is Curlew. I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Indigenous or Aboriginal culture, it's associated with death, and the call that the bird makes is quite haunting. So I try and steer clear of Curlew. I like Ibis.
All right. Well, I think that's pretty much it. Let me just double check. Oh yeah. I mean, of course, if people want to know more, I'll have a link in the video description of any of the links that you give me. But
there's probably two places, I think, if people want to know more. One is, if it's about election information, teamschrinner.com.au, but if it's about Brisbane City Council, then it's the council website, www.brisbane.qld.gov.au.
Yeah. All right, well, thanks again for your time, and good luck with the election. And,
thank you.
Yeah.
No, thank you for the time.
Thank you.